Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted on this episode to be talking with comics creator Kane Gallagher. Kane, thank you for joining.
How you going, mate? Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Absolutely. Glad to have you. Glad to have you. I believe I am the last stop on your tour, the last stop on the campaign. Is this true?
Yes, this is true. You get the lucky last interview, my friend.
Fantastic. All the secrets that haven't been shared, all of the truths about to spill. We're talking about the Underclass, which is a book that is currently funded, but still available for people to support, to back, to get copies of, and to see examples of. So I guess by means of an origins question, how did you get on this road of comics and creating?
Well, I've always been an artist. So, ever since I was a kid, ever since I could pick up a pencil and put it to paper, I've wanted to draw something. So I would say that I'm an artist first and then a writer.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, it's the first time I ever saw a comic or picked up a comic was when I was about 10 years old. Um, and it was issue number 100 of Wolverine. And that had me
Nice.
hooked straight away. As soon as I saw the cover, I was like, I want that.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I still have it to this day. I still have it in my collection of comics. I have a whole room full of them. But yeah, from there, there was no stopping. Like I just consumed comics. I just wanted to buy as many as I could and collect as many as I could and read as many as I could. Um, and yeah, I guess I was always trying to emulate what I saw on the pages, and create my own stories. Um, Obviously, it started with more like Marvel stuff.
Hmm.
But as I kind of grew up and through my teen years and my early 20s, I discovered more adult comics like Sin City and Preacher and things like that. And that had me hooked because that was my vibe straight away. Because I also grew up watching very violent films as well. So
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, like Tarantino films, I probably shouldn't have been watching those when I was like 10 or 11, but they
Hmm.
shaped
Hmm.
my storytelling for sure. Um, so yeah, that's kind of was the beginnings, but eventually I would just play around with different art styles and just see what I liked the best, and I tried a lot of them. I used to do more kind of manga stuff, but still with like an American kind of style mixed in with it. And I used to do a lot of like martial arts stuff. I was really always really into that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think when I discovered Jeff Darrow and this guy called Juan Jose Rep, that's when I knew what I wanted to do. I was like, that's the style I'm going to dedicate myself to. So from then on, I spent years and years studying their work and trying to replicate it. And then eventually I got to where I am now, where I created this book.
Nice, nice. What was the creative spark for the underclass? At what point did you know this is the direction I want to go in and this is the story that I want to tell?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it started originally with one image, and that is the chapter cover here for the second chapter.
Nice.
So, it was literally that image of two girls about to have a knife fight. And I was just trying to create something compelling and, fun, but violent. And from there I was kind of like, okay, obviously it's set in a school, what's happening here, just the image itself telling a story. And they're about to fight. And I was like, well, why would two schoolgirls be doing something so violent in a school? And I kind of, went through the process in my brain. Then it kind of hit me, and I was like, oh, well, what if the school taught them to be violent? So I think
Hmm.
that's a pretty
Hmm.
original idea. And from there, I was like, okay, well, what if it's a school for criminals? It's run by criminals, and it teaches people to be criminals, all types of criminals. And then I was always a fan of Sin City, so I wanted to kind of mix that in there, and I just kept developing and developing. And originally, I was planning on kind of creating these short stories and then submitting them to Heavy Metal magazine, so they could kind
Uh-huh.
of publish,
Uh-huh.
a chapter at a time. But eventually, I kind of kept going and had so many stories and so many pages. I was like, I could compile it into a graphic novel now, and that's kind of how it began the process of becoming this book.
Nice, nice. As somebody that begins with an image like that, I'm curious about your creative process. Does it flow kind of that way? Like particular images will occur to you, and then the story kind of emerges from there?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm always images first. Like I said, I
Hmm.
consider myself an artist before a writer. Um, but yeah, I've heard the way other people do it, and I had no experience prior to this really creating comics and being hands-on with it. Um, so for me, like I didn't know that people wrote a script and they explain, each scene and what's happening in that scene and what they're saying. Like it's almost like a movie script. I found that out after the fact. So I just did it the way I wanted to do it and the way that it inspired me, and that was through images. So I started with a storyboard. That's how I always start, and I know exactly what the characters are doing. I know what they're like in my mind. I know what their story is going to be, what their arc is going to be. So I know if I have a beginning and an end, I can pretty much figure out what's going to happen in the middle.
Yeah,
So then I kind of do all the storyboard and then I go back and then I write the dialogue. And then even once I'm doing the final line work, sometimes I'll even change the dialogue just to because once the image, you see the actual image on the paper, you go, oh, maybe I'll change this a little bit. It always looks different. It gives you new ideas. So that's how I've always done it. Yeah.
that's cool. Yeah, cool how an image can inspire like dialogue, a change in dialogue in the story.
Definitely, it's true. They say an image tells 1,000 words, and especially if you start with like a thumbnail, you know what I mean, and then you see the final panel, they can look so different. You know what I mean? Because you
Mhm.
put so much detail in the background and everything. It gives you a feel of a mood, and it's like, oh, I'm feeling more this from that, which is always
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. Um, Also imagining some strong anti-hero vibes here, some characters that can gather my attention, thinking about some of the characters that have inspired you, like you mentioned Wolverine. So a character that you almost love to hate, that sort of
Yeah.
situation.
I love an anti-hero. Huge
Yeah.
fan of anti-heroes. I love Punisher. I love Marv from Sin City,
Hmm.
and I definitely put a lot of that in this. Some of these characters, the things that they do are so horrible, but they're doing it for the right reasons. Even though sometimes it's borderline. Sometimes it's like, was that the right move? I think, it's always fun to shock people. That's always my goal. I want to get in people's faces and this is shocking, you know. Um, but it's also not like anything else you'll ever read. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, It sounds like film has inspired you a good bit too, talking about Tarantino. And when you were talking about seeing movies that you're really probably too young to see, I also went to like the RoboCop place in my mind because that was one of the first movies that I saw. So there's
Oh yeah.
definitely an undercurrent of Frank Miller appreciation to the talk as well.
100%. Yeah. I mean, Frank Miller's definitely my favorite writer. And yeah, same as you, I watched RoboCop way too young, but it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I've probably seen it like 100 times, you know. And that was a big inspiration for me as well in kind of everything that I write, going forward, because I love a revenge story. Everyone loves a
Hmm.
revenge story. And the way that revenge stories are so compelling is just like in RoboCop, where something so bad happens to the main character at the start, like heinously bad, that by the time he comes back and starts killing all of them in even more horrible ways, you're like, oh, that doesn't seem so bad. Like that's justified because of what they
Yep.
did before. You know what I mean? It has to be
Hmm.
bad in the beginning. It has to shock you, and then you don't care what happens to them. Really, you're rooting for him to do these horrible things to them. And I always love that kind of storytelling and those violent stories where you're rooting for it to be violent. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, when I first read Frank Miller's RoboCop comic, that was a
Hmm.
huge inspiration because the way, he wrote it the way he wanted the second movie to be, but in graphic novel form. And I was like, this is incredible. It's so much better
Hmm.
than the movie. Like, it's fantastic. And the art was just like, wow. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. You started with the image of the two girls at school. Were this to be captured as a movie poster or your graphic novel to be captured this way, what would be the image now that you feel like sums it up? Would it be or catches the audience? Would it be that same image or has that transformed?
Hmm. I think the cover is probably the best image, which is,
Hmm.
it's a wrap-around cover because it really shows all the characters in one. You know, you have the four main characters and they're in color.
Yeah.
So eyes drawn to them. You're focused on those characters. You know those characters are important and they're all covered in blood. But the background is all the other students in the school, and you can tell, okay, they're not really aware of what's going on, or they just don't care,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically what it is. But you're like, okay, something important is happening here because these characters are looking you in the eye. They're trying to tell you something with their eyes, but everyone else is looking forward. They're like drones. They're like, soldiers marching to war, but these characters, they're telling you they feel something. And I think it's a compelling image. And I'm glad I made it the cover because originally the cover was different. But after a few rounds of editing, we thought this one was better. So I think it worked out well.
Yeah, it's a great image. And just thinking about, I work with young people a good bit. So thinking about the search for yourself and the way you're finding the world and standing out, and how sometimes it does seem like there are just a lot of people around you that are journeying through life. Yeah.
Yeah, the sheep, you know.
Yep. Yep.
It's like, okay, we all have to march to work or march to school and do the 9 to 5 thing, but every now and then you get someone that wants to be different, and I think
Hmm.
that's always good in life. You'll never know what you can be unless you try. Trying something different is always good.
Yeah. Yeah. The adage of most people trying to be different by being like everybody else
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
versus actually trying to be different. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What's your vision for the world that you've created? Are you now interested in seeing kind of how this plays out over multiple graphic novels? Are you brewing the next story idea?
Yes. So originally I had maybe 5 or 6 books planned. So this is the first in a series. But now I think I've kind of boiled it down to three. So I think it's going to be a trilogy. Because
Nice.
originally I had it and planned it to go like over generations and generations and then kind of go into the future. But my editor kind of said, maybe don't cross genres like that because it can get confusing. So I was like, okay, that's a good point. So I'm sticking really with the crime element, which has always been compelling to me. But yeah, I'm already working on the second book. I've done about 10 pages so far, and it's going to be bigger. It's going to be about 150 pages, and yeah, it's because this book is completely set within the school. So you don't really see the outside world until like the very end, and you only get like a snippet of it. Um, but the next book will expand into the outer city, and then you'll find out, it becomes more like Sin City. It's like, okay, some of these characters that are grown up, and how do they cope with this kind of world, and why does this school exist in the first place? Well, it must be a pretty bad city if the school is here. And yeah, it's a very violent city, but it goes into more kind of mental illness themes and psychological horror, but also some more action, and extreme violence. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Time for a field trip.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool how you're following the questions that would naturally follow from something like this of, okay, these are kids in this world. What do they become? Where do they go? So that'll be really interesting to see kind of the wider sphere that you're creating too.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in human psychology as well. And
Hmm. Hmm.
often people who have, mental issues, it starts in childhood. And it's like, well, if you grew up in this sort of environment in this book, what help do you have to have a normal psyche growing up? I want to play around with who would that person become as an adult? How would it affect them? And can they, do they have any chance of being a good person, or are they just going to succumb to violence because that's all they know? You know what I mean?
Thinking about like Foucault and the Panopticon and all of those kind of things of like a society that's kind of run like a prison. What does that look like?
Yeah, exactly. And in this book, essentially, it is, they're essentially in a prison for children,
Yeah.
but they're being taught how to survive that prison. And if they don't have that learning ability, um, then what chance do they have survive in the city? I guess those skills will help them survive, but at what cost?
Yeah. Yeah. Really good questions to drive the narrative. Any shout outs to, well, you mentioned the editor, any shout outs on the creative team, the support of getting Kickstarter underway, any of that that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, so my publishing company is called Wild North Comics, so they've helped me a lot. And particularly my editor, which is his name is Timothy Parrish, and he helped me a lot in this process. So the book is pretty much 100% done by me, written and illustrated. But he helped me edit it in like we moved some of the stories around, moved the order of them, which I think works better. But I did write them in a way which they could go in any order and it would still work. But his idea was better than mine of the order. He also it was his idea to make this the cover. The cover was different originally, which I think was the right move. It was definitely a good idea. After, I wrestled with it for a little while and then I asked a few people and they said, yeah, this is a better cover. And I was like, okay, I'm on board. And yeah,
Yeah.
adding things like the yearbook and the textbook pages, which give you an insight into what these kids are reading, what they're being taught. Those were all his ideas. And I just created them from that spark of an idea. And yeah, they were definitely very helpful. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Anything that we've missed that you want to make sure to mention before we tell people where to find it, where to find you and support those sort of things?
Um, I mean, not that I can think of. All I'll say is that, if you're a fan of really hyper detailed line work, and if you're a fan of things like Sin City and crime stories, this book is for you. So I would say check it out. Anyone who's into that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, curious about where people can find you, either social media, convention spaces, things like that. And also, many congrats again on the book funding. If I'm a listener out there and I want to find out how I can get a copy and continue to support, anything that you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, so I think there's about 2, maybe 3 hours left on the Kickstarter right now, but we will be continue running after the finish. So we'll be taking late pledges. So yeah, you can go there anytime and still get a copy. So just go to Kickstarter and look up the Underclass and it will come up. Um, Also, yeah, if you want to see some of my work, you just go to Instagram and look for kgdesigns.art, and I have links there that will take you to the Kickstarter as well. But yeah, eventually when the campaign is fully over, we'll be selling it on the Wild North Comics website. So you just go to wildnorthcomics.com and there's a full catalog of all the stuff they publish on there, and my stuff will be up there as well when the Kickstarter's over. And as far as conventions and stuff, I mean, I've just done a whole bunch, and I'm doing one tomorrow, which is the
Ah,
Perth Comic Arts Festival, and that's from I think it starts at 10 and ends at 4, and I'll be selling all my books and the Wild North Comics books. I'm not 100% sure yet, but I might be going to, I think, Supernova in Sydney as well in September. So yeah, I'm still tossing up whether I can get there or not, but hopefully we'll make it work. Yeah.
nice, nice. As a side note here, I've learned just a little bit about the comics industry and how it's thriving in Australia, and so cool that it seems to be this center of activity. Lots of creative minds there, so I love that as well.
Yeah, it's awesome, and everyone's very supportive of each other as well. Even if we're not working for the same company or whatever, we promote each other, we help each other. Even on this campaign, some people were nice enough to give me some PDF versions of their books to put in the PDF bundle, And they didn't have to do that. They're essentially giving away a book for free, but I'll do the same for them when they have their next campaign. So everyone's really supportive. It's cool like that.
Cool. Very cool indeed. Well, glad we had the chance to connect. I'm excited to see where the project goes and where you continue world building, the directions that you go in. And I hope everyone goes and checks it out and reads something good.
Yeah, I think people will enjoy it. Yeah, give it a chance, give it a shot. I've already had some pretty good feedback so far, and people are loving it. Yeah, if this is the stuff you're into, trust me, you'll like it. Yeah.